Hey guys, welcome to the Orthodox Logos. I'm here with my co-host of The Road to Paradise, Nathaniel Harmon. And
What's up,
today we are going to be talking to Isaac Tahiri of the Traditionalist Project. Somebody I've been wanting to have on for quite some time. We've been talking for the last few months or so. And today's topic is going to be a continuation for our series titled What's Wrong with the World? And unfortunately, we can't really, there's a lot that's wrong with the world. So part 4, I think this is 3 or 4, is not scratching the surface. But we're going to touch on G.K. Chesterton's book, What's Wrong with the World. We have some talking points from the book. And, we're going to be speaking about traditionalism, capitalism, socialism, feminism, all the isms.
All the phobes.
All the phobiisms. And so, we're here with Isaac. How you doing, buddy?
Yeah, I'm good. Pleasure to be here. I think we've been talking about this for a long time, and it's just been a little difficult to line it up, but here we are. So I'm glad. It's an honor to appear on here. I think what you guys are doing is amazing, and a lot of my following is following you as well. And I've heard all sorts of things about the podcast and the episodes, and it seems that people leave these discussions feeling edified, feeling motivated, or maybe even mystified by some of the content that's being unpackaged.
By Nathan's beard.
Oh, please.
Yeah, but of course.
Well,
I'm distracted as we speak.
it's more my haircut. I had a funny conversation a while back where someone asked me why I shave my head if I'm trying to make myself look disconcerting. And I was like, no, I just enjoy the ritual of shaving, but I'm not touching my face with a razor.
Yeah.
That'll do it.
So I guess we could get into a little bit about you, why you started the Traditionalist Project, and a brief background. You can make it as long or as short as you want. And I know a little bit about you, but I want to know everything.
Oh, might take a while. Let's see. So in terms
Starting
of,
with the most important question, how Indo-European are you?
do I need to like to do like a 23andMe or something?
Yeah,
If you want like a real hot take of the day, I've heard opinions that like 23andMe is some sort of intelligence gathering.
Oh, for sure. We're gonna insert your DNA results right here.
Well,
for everybody.
Well, you've seen the jokes whenever Facebook does what's the 10-year comparison for you? It's the FBI saying, man, if only we had up-to-date facial recognition on everybody, and Facebook's
Oh yeah,
we got you, bro.
100%.
That's exactly what 23andMe is.
So give
exactly.
us a background on you, where you're from. We can't see you, so describe yourself. Give us your best attributes.
Yeah, my apologies for that. I do want to set up a bit of a spot. I moved recently, and I just haven't got it done yet. So
No, it's all good.
But that's in the plan. I'm from Southeast Wisconsin. So I'm Midwest through and through, born and raised. And I'm in Indiana right now, just north of Indianapolis. I took a job down here, so I moved down here. But I don't know, in terms of background of who I am personally, not much to say, just regular Joe who's interested in Western classicism, theology, philosophy, and a recent uptick in the interest of like the philosophy of beauty as influenced by the writings of Sir Roger Scruton. What's
Out
that?
of curiosity, have you read anything from Dr. Timothy Petitsis? He put out a book about, I'd say, a year and a half ago called The Ethics of Beauty, where he talks about beauty from an Orthodox perspective.
From an Orthodox perspective, really?
Yeah, he's the dean of Hellenic College. So
Okay.
it's a pretty good book.
It's like a 2,000 page book.
That's like 750 pages.
Okay, so it's about 2,000 pages.
It's shorter than the Gulag Archipelago. We're fine.
Yeah. It'll be interesting. I'll look into that. But and not much to say about me personally, and really, none of these podcast episodes or commentaries I write or quote graphics I make. I never want it to be a reflection of who I am. Just I kind of prefer the ambiguity of just people dissecting me for the merits of my philosophy and the journey I'm on, rather than who I am as a person. But that's a whole other philosophy and whole other discussion. In terms of why I started the Traditionalist Project, I was about halfway through my 4-ish years at public university, and I had grown up non-denominational Protestant, and it turns out that and with all due respect to my Protestant brothers and sisters, but it turns out that non-denominational Protestantism doesn't really have a lot of staying power, right? It doesn't have a lot to keep you and really help you understand that to be a Christian is a lifestyle. It's a way of life. It's how you live it. It's more than just the theology you know, or how many times you've read Luther or R.C. Sproul or all their superheroes and Calvin.
How many times you've read Sproul or Calvin, it's how many times God predestined you to do it.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so basically, I was quote unquote Christian, but not living it at all. I was living a hedonistic lifestyle, doing whatever the hell I wanted to do, chasing whatever pleasures I wanted to chase, and then a series of bad experiences, falling out with friends, bad breakups, and things like that. And then it kind of opened my eyes to what I was doing and the lifestyle I was living, and also being at a public university. Like I saw what was around me, the degeneracy there, the hedonism there, the complete rejection of any sort of personal responsibility, or the idea that maybe it's a virtue to deny yourself in certain areas. And I saw the effects it was having on me. I had bad bouts of depression, mental health issues, and I saw this around me too, in my peers and my colleagues, and everybody was seemingly bouncing from pleasure to pleasure, but there was no fulfillment. And in fact, I could see the degradation of the souls of the people around me and myself. And initially, this made me very angry, right? And I would literally cry out to God and be like, why would you allow this? Like, why would you, especially when it came to mental health, like, why would you create me in such a way to like go to the point of being this, despondent and dejected, and to the point of, wanting to take extreme measures to rectify that. And I was so angry, literally angry. I'm talking like visible anger. And so I met up again with an old mentor of mine he was my soccer coach in high school, and also kind of like a mentor to me. He's a Protestant pastor, and even though we could disagree on theology, if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be a Christian at all. So I reconnected with him in the midst of all this, and I was like, just trying to drill him on God, and like, how could there be a merciful and benevolent and loving God, but here I am, like, why, and there's all these issues, and people are in pain, and there's so much suffering. And I was like, his name is Tim. He's actually coming to my baptism.
Glory to God.
Yeah. And I was like, Tim, like, this is not a loving God. Like, I cry out to God. I really was at the time too, crying out to God to reveal himself. Like, make yourself, like, as we would love him to do, just make yourself readily apparent to the point where I can't deny it. Like, just like, come on, like, do it, right? Challenging God in a sense.
Do what you've done with Moses in the burning bush.
Right. Like, why can't I be like that? Send an angel to wrestle with me or something, like.
Right. What you've done to Michaela Peterson.
Yeah. And he kind of just slapped me in the face and was like, you know what, Isaac, you're demanding that God acts how you want him to act, and you're demanding that God speaks to you. But when's the last time you sat down and read scripture?
Yeah.
We have the word of God and we can read it every day. When's the last time you dove into it? You haven't. Right? And pretty much he kind of pegged me down a few steps and hit me and exposed my pride. And there was a turning point there where I was like, you know what? I don't want to be what the world wants me to be. I don't want to be what I have been. I don't want to become what I see around me. So I need to change. There's something inherently wrong with what I'm doing, and there's a sin and there's an evil within me, and I need to root that out. No one else is causing this issue of my soul, right?
Yeah,
it's not God. It's
your own free will.
Right, exactly. And so this kind of springboarded me into diving deeper into my faith and figuring that out and trying to take it more seriously. And then that prompted me to kind of analyze my Protestantism and the theology there. I ran into a good buddy in college who's actually here right now. He's in my apartment, a guest of mine, Catholic buddy. And we, we would go back and forth after class at university, and I would, debate him my Protestant debating points, and he'd hit me back with the Catholic theological points, and it was just back and forth, and me and my pride and my, wonderful Calvinism and all that, and predestination and whatnot, and views of salvation. I thought I had it in the bag. I had an answer to everything, except for there's one question that springboarded all of this and my leaving of Protestantism, and it was about intercessory prayer, right? The old classic, like, why ask the saints for intercession when I could go directly to God or pray directly to Christ. Like, what's the point, right? And I thought, I mean, of course, chins up high. I'm like, yeah, I got him. He's got no answer to that. And the response was actually really, really simple. And he asked me, do you ask your parents to pray for you?
Yeah.
Right.
I was like, yeah, of course. He's like,
You ask fellow Christians to pray.
Right, yeah, right. Christians, yes, your pastor pray for you. And I was like, yeah. And he was just pretty much like, well,
Do you believe in intercessory
what's,
prayer?
what's the difference? And you know what? It sounds so simple, right? But I went home that day after class and I was just like undone. I was undone. I was like, I don't have an answer to that. And he's right. And it's something so simple. And if I'm wrong about something so easily explained,
What else am I wrong about?
Yeah. And
well, I think people have a hard time, sorry to interrupt, I think people have a hard time separating asking your friends, family, and other Christians to pray for you because they say, well, that's fine, but you're praying to the dead or you're praying to pictures. You know, they don't realize that when we die as Orthodox Christians, there is no separation. You know, if anything, we become closer to God, you know, after death. So it's like they have this weird idea, well, they're dead. Why would you pray to them?
Right.
Well,
Right.
They miss some of St. Paul as well, because as St. Paul says, if you're absent from your body, you're present with Christ, right?
Right.
And the way that plays out, you know, because St. Paul doesn't explain that terribly much. I'll give that to the Protestants, but you go into Revelation and it's like, oh, where are the reposed in Christ? They're under the altar asking Christ how long he's going to suffer the things that are going on in the world to keep on going on. And it's like, that looks an awful lot like intercession from the saints.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%. And so, yeah, that single question kind of like it was the final chink in the dam and everything just kind of flowed from there. And I was like, you know, I need to analyze everything I believe right now. I really need to reevaluate everything. And then that kind of started this long journey into Catholicism because I was not exposed to Orthodoxy. So I was like, well, if it's not Protestantism, then surely it must be.
You're on the right track.
Right. And so I was really doing that. I met so many wonderful priests, was attending mass, went to a lot of shrines, different parishes all over the state of Wisconsin. Wonderful experience, like life-changing experience. And then I even moved to Indianapolis because I got a job working for a Catholic group and everything. Like I was about to become baptized and confirmed in the Catholic Church. Like it was like 99% of the way there, right? And I was in the office one day and I was like, you know, this whole journey out of Protestantism, I've had to listen to people that I didn't listen to before earnestly and with intention. And I've had to evaluate, you know, their position. And I was like, I don't think I've ever sat and listened to an Orthodox person explain their faith. I never sat through, like I never listened to them. I don't know what they have to say. I've never heard them out. So how could I in good conscience, you know, declare the Catholic Church is the one true church without ever having heard what the East has to say? Like that, I just couldn't do that in good conscience, right? And I was like, it was bugging me. And I'm telling you, this is about the time when I'm like speaking with Catholic priests to try to find a time to get confirmed and do this whole process, right? And I was like, you know, I got to call up an Orthodox priest. Turns out, luckily enough, you know, God's providence is interesting. I moved to Indianapolis, which in the immediate area just has so many Orthodox parishes to choose from. Whereas where I was in Wisconsin, like you got to drive 2-3+ hours to find just one tiny little chapel of Orthodoxy. So I called up a priest and I was like, this is my position. I'm in between Catholicism and Orthodoxy. I don't know where to go. They both make sense to me. So can I come talk to you? And so he's like, yeah. And he didn't, and I went and I spoke with him and he was very kind and he just kind of, you know, gave me an introduction into Orthodoxy and wasn't like anti-Catholic or like, yeah, don't believe this because X, Y, and Z. He was just
we're cousins.
Yeah. He's like, just come attend liturgy. Here's the books by Timothy Ware, read those. And I kept going to liturgy, kept reading. And eventually I was like, you know, I not only do I agree with this more, but there's a peace in my soul when I'm attending liturgy. There's a piece of in good conscience. I like this, and again, this is not like a 1 week process. This was a month process of trying to like actually putting the books down and just trying to experience Orthodoxy, not learn Orthodoxy.
So I'm going to ask you a question real quick that I know a lot of people like to ask. What did you think of your first experience at a liturgy?
I was almost overwhelmed. I didn't like it was as if I was kind of frozen.
Too much incense, huh?
Yeah. I had to get out the inhaler. You know, I was having an asthmatic attack. But I was just, I mean, really, the priest, bless his heart, he gave me a little tour of the cathedral just one-on-one. So I was able to see all the icons and just couldn't. I couldn't speak. I had never
The
experienced anything like
paintings.
that before.
We
Yeah.
refer to them as the paintings.
Yeah, it was.
It's okay, Isaac. I'll slap him for you.
Yeah, it was otherworldly, otherworldly. Which is not to say like the masses I attended in the Catholic Church, especially.
Yeah, but it's heaven on earth.
Yeah, it was just something different, and I can't find it anywhere else. And in fact, I don't mean to. So
yeah,
it got me. And so that was pretty much it. And then here we are a couple months later, and I'm getting baptized next week.
Seraphim, right? You picked Seraphim.
Seraphim of Sarov. That's the one.
Cool. That's what.
Yeah, I saw your little post about American converts. Seraphim. Yeah.
For some reason, I thought you were going with Ephraim.
I was gonna go with Ephraim. For months. I was just trying to decide between Ephraim and Seraphim, and there's actually a story behind that as well. Quick story. I was like, it was months in, and I was like, I don't know what to choose. I have this affinity for both of them, and I was like, there's a little like a gift shop in my parish where they sell icons and whatnot, and I was like, let's just go after liturgy and see if there's an Ephraim icon, and if there's an Ephraim icon, it's over. I'm locking in. We're doing Ephraim, because I was like really 50-50, like really 50-50.
Like a Gideon and the fleece kind of thing.
Yeah. And so I go, and lo and behold, there's no Ephraim. All right, okay, well that's fine. And there's also like a book section of this shop where the books and the icons are separate for purchase, like they're in different rooms. And so I go into the books, and I'm just looking for whatever I can grab, because I don't know. Well, the thing is, I like to buy something at the store because I never have cash on me, right? So when they come around for the offering, I never have any cash on hand to put in. So I'm like, what? I'll just use my card, buy something to give to the parish, right? And so I'm looking for a book, nothing catches my eye. And then literally tucked away on the bookshelf, like kind of behind the books, literally in a dark corner, tucked away, I see an icon. And I'm like, well, that's funny. Like, what's an icon doing here in this section? And I look at it, I go up to it, and it's in Russian, obviously. And I'm like, this is Seraphim of Sarov. Like, I've never at this parish have I ever seen a Russian icon. I just, not at all. And so I go to the guy who's running the store. I'm like, hey, is this for sale? Like, what is this doing in here? He's like, He's like, I don't remember ordering that. Like, I don't. Yeah. And so we go on and ask our priest, like, where did this Seraphim of Sarov icon come from? He's like, an elderly couple had just passed away in the middle of the week, and they wanted to donate all their icons to the parish. And I was like, well, wow, this is wonderful. Like, that's beautiful. And he's like, yeah. He's like, in fact, like, take it. Like, just take it for free. Just take the icon. And I was like, well, my little story is, I think Seraphim found me. I didn't find Seraphim. So that's what I went with.
Has a way of doing that to people. Have you heard how his relics were rediscovered after the Soviet Union?
No, I haven't heard the story.
Oh, this is a hilarious story. So, because the godless Bolsheviks were godless wretches, they had their Museum of Atheism, right, in Moscow. So, one day it was in the 70s or 80s. There's these two guys that are doing some maintenance work in the basement of this museum. And they've been working on this project, whatever it is, for a couple of days. And they come across this box that's about 8 foot long, 2 foot, 3 foot wide, and it's covered in a tarp. I'm like, what the heck is this? And they can't find it in any of their manifests. Like, it doesn't belong there. They're not sure what the heck it is and what it's doing there. These guys are both devout atheists, right? They're hardcore communist Bolsheviks. And they're like, oh, I wonder what's in here. So they pull the tarp off, they pry open the lid, and there's the incorrupted relics of Saint Seraphim of Sarov in there, in the basement of the Museum of Atheism.
Imagine. Like, actually, speaking of the relics of Saint Seraphim, I was just in DC last weekend, and I was able to attend Saint John the Baptist Russian Cathedral there, connected with Saint John of Shanghai and whatnot. And they had a giant icon of Seraphim of Sarov, and in the icon are a couple holy relics, like a strand of his hair and a couple other things. It was a wonderful experience. But yeah, it's just a little bit about me.
Cool. Yeah,
sounds like Saint Seraphim definitely has picked you.
So.
Yeah, I'd say so.
That's awesome. Well, glory to God. And when's your baptism date?
February 5th.
Cool.
Nice.
All right. Well, we'll be praying for you. We'll add you to the prayer roll.
Much appreciated.
But I guess it's good to know a little bit more about you. Some of those things I didn't know, so I appreciate that. I guess we could get into, I know you wanted to go to Vespers. What time is it your time? Just so I'm aware.
It is currently 3:44 p.m. Vespers is at 5 p.m.
Okay, we'll do what we can. If we need to do a part 2, we can. And also for everybody watching, apologies on any audio or video issues. We had quite a fun time figuring things out. So we went with the classic MacBook Pro FaceTime HD, super crisp. Nathan could not tell the difference between this and my $1,000 camera. So if that says anything about Nathan.
Okay, well, I use a fountain pen and write in cursive instead of taking notes
Exactly.
on a computer. So apparently I would like to think that's a pretty normal thing, but I've had multiple people approach me in public and like,
You write?
you can write in cursive? I'm like, yeah.
Like, what does it say?
The sacred texts.
Well, these people are my age, right? I'm in my 30s, and these people are my age, and they're like, wow, I can't even do that. I'm like,
What
the heck do you
happened?
mean you can't write in cursive?
So maybe that can lead us into our topic
Oh dear.
about tradition.
Okay,
Is
that's not where I thought you were going, but I'm pleased we didn't go in a different direction.
No, so Nathan, do you have anything you wanna start with? Unfortunately, I was starting a new job this week, training. I got to pick through the sections we're talking about, but I haven't got to read it. So I'm gonna kind of be like a moderator, and you guys can go ahead and debate.
Oh, I don't think it's going to be terribly much debated. Out of
Yeah,
curiosity,
possibly.
what was your degree in when you went to a public university?
Oh yeah, I was really into the politics, so I did public administration and political science, and I kind of was doing a pre-law track. Actually, just a tidbit. We're not going to get too much into it, but I got elected at the age of 19 to my county board where I was staying for university. It was pretty interesting stuff. Like local politics is an interesting animal, but yeah.
Well,
Well, indeed, you're far more qualified than I am to talk about Chesterton and politics. I've got some, as far as elections go in politics, maybe we'll get into some fun stuff, but I've got some definitely.
he loves democracy.
Questionable.
That is
Questionable.
unequivocally not.
Questionable. Questionable. The eye twitch that came from that comment says otherwise.
You should see me when I'm less amenable.
All right, so yeah, I think Nathan was going to start with a quote,
Sure.
and then we can kind of get into some of the points with Chesterton's book.
So the topics we were going to discuss are ownership of property, suffrage, and tradition versus efficiency. But I figured a good quote to start us off with on that whole series of topics is actually the last couple of lines in the entire text. And that proceeds as follows. I do not object to socialism because it will revolutionize our commerce, but because it will leave it so horribly the same. So as that relates to ownership of property, suffrage, and efficiency, what do you think? What comes to mind, and what observations do you have for us?
Well, I think the first thing that comes to mind is, well, obviously something in the now is terribly wrong, and certainly something that was in his time was terribly wrong. And I think this opens up a point that perhaps a lot of people aren't willing to consider, or maybe specifically Americans, is that capitalism in and of itself, running freely as it does, is not necessarily inherently a virtue, right? But I think that we're kind of conditioned to believe that, so long as money is being made, and I guess by some sort of metrics, the quality of life is perpetually increasing, then it's all good to go. But of course, this does not comment on things that I think are more important, like the state of the soul of individuals involved in this system, but also on a macro level, the state of the soul of a society, of a whole nation.
If I can engage in a semantic quibble real fast.
Yeah.
Would you say it has more to do with the quality of existence as opposed to the quality of life?
Yeah, I would say that's relevant. Yeah.
One of the apologies if this is too crazy of a hobby horse, but people who have listened to the podcast a little bit and have followed any of my writing, if they've had the misfortune of finding it, are aware that I spent a decent chunk of my career thus far in emergency medicine and laboratory medicine. And one of the things you realize if you're paying attention when you do that is there is this absurd obsession with keeping people alive for 10 more minutes or another day or another week. I mean, there's a story that I tell occasionally where it's like this must have been, heck, I don't even think I was old enough to legally buy a beer. So it was 11 or so odd years ago, maybe 12 years ago. And this guy brings his wife into the ER, and she's, skinnier than all get out. She's got cancer that is metastasized everywhere. I mean, I could probably pick her up with one hand, and you could count bones in her body that you shouldn't be able to see. and she's got pneumonia, and she's in her late 70s, early 80s. And so I'm in there with the doctor, and she's not doing good. She's trying pretty hard to kick down death's door. And we asked the husband, we're like, hey man, so if your wife's heart stops beating, what do you want us to do? And he says, well, I want you to do everything you can to save her life. And I felt really bad at the time, but I was also really angry at him. So I'm like, dude, if I do one chest compression on her, I'm going to take all of her ribs off her sternum.
Mm.
And if she has the misfortune to survive that for a couple of days,
The pain.
the pain she's going to suffer is going to be beyond anything you can conceive. She's going to have hemopneumothorax. She might even have some cardiac laceration. She's going to have all kinds of problems. I mean, she might even have a lacerated liver, God forbid. Who knows what's going to happen. And I'm like, dude, I hate to break it to you, but this is for you. Like, you want us to torture your wife for you. That's not good, man. And like that's what I mean by quibbling about existence versus quality of life, because so many people are obsessed with existing a little bit longer and not recognizing, hey, when it's time to go, it's time to go. And maybe that's too aggressive of a topic to go down right now. But
no, but that is an interesting point that I kind of think does relate to almost everything that Chesterton talks about here. But ultimately, I think that boils down to is if you don't have a worldview, or if you don't have an understanding, or at least a thought of an understanding of what happens after death, if you don't have a conception of eternity, or
then you want to cling on.
Then you're going to you're going to cling to anything you can here, right? You're going to cling to things like politics. You're going to cling to things like material wealth. You're going to cling to things like status and pleasure, because really that for a lot of people, especially in the modern world,
that's America.
That is your existence. That is your existence. Your existence is an amalgamation of all these trivialities that will disappear as a mist.
The disconcerting part is, though, a lot of that happens with people who would claim to be Christians, though.
Right.
That's, in America, in American Orthodoxy, when COVID hit, right? So Ian and I's spiritual father said something that I parroted without knowing that he'd said these things, and I had to eat these words almost immediately after saying them. But when people were first freaking out about COVID, when it was first hitting US shores, at least as far as we knew at that point, and churches were closing down, I was talking to a family member, and they were like, oh, so what are the Orthodox going to do? And I was like, we're not going to shut down. We've gone through plague and persecution and natural disaster, and we stay open. We get the liturgy to people, and we get the gifts, we get the Eucharist to people. That's what we do. The next week, we shut down.
Yeah. What if I can ask, what parish do you guys attend? Or
Holy Cross.
It's Greek, and I would definitely say, I would definitely say, our spiritual father
was not happy about those words.
He understands what's going on. So as you know, we don't have to get too deep into the
right. Just curious. Yeah.
But that's kind of funny.
Well, I mean, like I said that, I think one of the guys that converted with me said the same
thing. I was
thing.
surprised when I found out that happened. Once I started going, I was like, you guys shut down? I was like, the Russians didn't shut down. What are we doing?
The Russians are doing some interesting things that probably aren't fit to talk about on the podcast.
That could be a whole series of episodes right there.
Well, I'm not saying Russia as in the His Holiness Kirill and Orthodox Church in Russia. I'm talking about
Russia.
ROCOR. What ROCOR's doing in the States is pretty interesting. It's not anything bad, but it's
another episode.
They're smart. They're reading the future and saying, okay, well, this is what
and they're looking at the past.
Yeah.
Hey.
Well, that's okay. So my brain is mush from this last week of training. We were touching on people's obsession with hanging on to things in this life. So
and I think this relates to what Chesterton kind of gets at when he touches about traditionalism and kind of the fear of the past. I think that to sit and to contemplate the past, you kind of have to have an understanding of this continuum and this goal that society is reaching toward, and where you fit in that. And I think looking at the past is a more healthy way of understanding yourself and self-identity and purpose. But there is this apparent fear that we have now of looking back. It's much easier to charge forward, to keep consuming, to do the next best thing, to do the next, whatever the next cultural fad is. And I think there's some interesting commentary that Chesterton gets at here. If I can just reference a quote real quick.
Sure. I have 4 pages of quotes written down, so reference whatever you'd like.
Yeah, wonderful. So he goes on to say that the modern mind is forced toward the future by a certain sense of fatigue, not unmixed, with terror, with which it regards the past. And I think this is profound, because I think it might explain why we're seeing such a disdain for anything that has happened in the past, especially in Christendom. We have to almost, it seems as though modern man has to destroy it. He has to ignore it. He has to dispel it, because we cannot live up to those achievements of the forefathers who came before us, right? And the future is a blank slate. The future doesn't exist. In the future, I can be whoever I want to be. I can be the hero, because nothing has happened yet.
Or whatever you want to be.
Right? Yeah.
We're not
quite literally.
We are not going there.
Sorry.
Quite literally. But if I look at the past, and I look at my father who came before me, or my grandfather, or my great-grandfather, and the achievements they made, and the strides they made for me to be where I'm at now, then you kind of, you have someone pushing you. You have some coals on your feet to become something, to do something, to live for something greater than yourself. And that is completely incompatible with modern humanism and the modern worldview.
Especially for people who are, I'm a first-generation American. I'm not sure if you fall in that line. I know you said your family.
I guess technically I'd fall second generation, although one of my parents was born and raised in the United States. So one's an immigrant, one's not.
I think I tend to see, and of course there's a minority of people that don't follow this, but I think I find a lot of value in tradition because of me being a first generation American, and knowing where I come from, and knowing what the past generations went through to even get me here, and striving to not break that lineage of tradition. Just like you said, you look at your grandfather or your father, and hopefully most people that came here as a first generation American, they can say, no, this stuff is important. We're not going to just trash all this stuff that these people built. And we see now that it's like we're trying to start new traditions, and those new traditions are pretty toxic, and they're moving us as far away from God as possible. So
I might have a slightly different take on this, because unlike you guys, I'm not. My family's been on both sides. My family's been here for almost 400 years. I've got family that live in Maine. I've got family in Texas, and my family's lived in Arizona for.
He's about as white as you get.
I'm about as American as you get.
There you go.
With the exception of my current political.
Isn't that what I said?
No.
Oh.
But the
Spotify's going to flag this one real quick.
Yeah, you're done. You're done.
But one of the interesting things I think that Chesterton kind of touches on when he's talking about the obsession over the future, and I don't remember precisely where the quote is, but he makes the observation that when we effectively abandon the traditions of our fathers, and when we ignore them and obsess over, well, we've got to do this for the future, as opposed to we've got to do this for the past, that does two things. It divorces us from what you might classify as a sense of filial piety. So that's one of the things that really defined Western and even Eastern culture to a degree.
That's Greek.
No,
Filio?
that's Roman.
That's Roman?
No, filial piety.
Okay.
It's a Roman phrase, or it's a Latin phrase rather, not Roman. Roman's not a language, in case anyone didn't know. But when you remove that sense of filial piety, you're then able to justify doing anything in the future, and you become the one who's deserving of that filial piety. So in some ways, it's a really, really hubristic action. And that, I think, is why science fiction has become such an interesting phenomena in the modern world, and why most science fiction is like Star Trek or Star Wars, where it's like, oh yeah, this wonderful, great world with a few minor issues, but it's because people hold to religion and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's a couple monsters or.
Right. Well, honestly, the best science fiction in a modern sense that I've ever read is the Warhammer 40,000 franchise.
Oh, sure.
And I don't know, have you ever read any of that?
I haven't read it, but I kind of know some of the story.
Okay, well, regrettably, I know far more of it than I have any business knowing because I think it's awesome. But one of the interesting things about that is it actually engages with a lot of cultural and religious issues, and it reads them through a nihilistic lens and is like, yeah, if this is the kind of world you want, where the strongest get to do whatever they want,
There you go.
here's what the world looks like, and it does that on a galactic
Or
scale.
Dune.
Well, Dune, I'm not familiar with Dune,
but yeah, it's kind of the same.
I've watched every Dune movie that's been made, unfortunately, and I don't understand what's going on.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's about. So maybe I ought to read the books, but I'm not that motivated. But that's the issue with the future, is we look towards the future as something that we bequeath as a gift to our children or our grandchildren, our great grandchildren, because we are the ones that are gifting it. We tend to think that it's going to be awesome, and then whatever shortcuts we take, whatever morally questionable things that we do to gift that future are justifiable because it's for the children. Whereas what we should be doing is engaging in that filial piety for the children.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it would be healthy for people to. I don't know the best way to apply this either, but like in your everyday, the actions you're doing and the toils we struggle with, and in our kind of desire to make something of ourselves and to make a stable family or to pursue Christ or in whatever regard, I think it would be healthy for us to go about our actions with posterity in mind. You know, how will this be remembered? How does this honor those who came before me? But how does this also set up a foundation for the success of those who come after me? Like, am I going to be remembered for my deeds? Not to say that we need to be superstars and going down into the annals of history as heroes, but you know, in the same sense that I have gratitude for my grandfather, is my grandchild going to have gratitude for me? But also, am I honoring and continuing that line that my forefathers laid before me?
Right. Well, that needs to be the focus, I think. The honoring your fathers or your grandfathers, honoring the traditions that have been handed down to you, in so much as they're copacetic with Christianity, with the Christian tradition.
Right. Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
We need to do that, because that is where children see the example, and that's when children know, this is something worth passing down. Like
we have an example
have you ever
in Christ, so it's like.
Have you ever read anything from the life of Saint Solomon?
Passingly, not in depth.
So Saint Safroni wrote a short book called The Monk of Mount Athos. It's either V or A, I don't remember.
It's the monk. I have it somewhere.
Yeah, so it's The Monk of Mount Athos. It's only like 160 pages, super short. And the first quarter of it is his life, his hagiography, and the last bit of it is
teachings.
Is the brief coverage of his teachings for most things. And one of the things that he talks about is, you can tell the character of a man and how much he has walked down the road of repentance by how he interacts with other people. And because if he's gracious to other people, then he's obviously aware of his own sin. But the other thing that he ties into that is, if you are willing to engage in morally dubious behavior to get to what you think is going to be a morally sound end, the entire road necessarily is evil and sinful. It doesn't matter what the end goal is, you're going to corrupt it, right? So we should do the traditional things and the Christian things because they are good, and that will lead to the end of people seeing, and our children and grandchildren seeing, Grandpa Seraphim did X, Y, and Z no matter what. He even had some really, really bad years, and he still did the right thing. He still held by these Christian traditions. And, he still died having a rough time, but his attitude during that was so beautiful. I want that thing. I don't know if that makes sense. I kind of ranted randomly there for a
No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So moving forward, I know, what time do you have to leave? I want to make sure that you have time to get there. And like I say, we can do a part 2, because we're kind of just getting started.
So I had an audio cut out. I got a little choppy. Are you saying, repeat that again?
Yeah. What time do you have to leave? I know you have to be there at 5. How long does it take you? So that way, it's
about a 20-minute drive to my parish.
Okay. Can you hear me right now? I just got a notification that my internet's stable. My internet connection is unstable. All right, well, you just tell us when you have to go, and we can do a part 1 up on YouTube, part 2 this week. I think we're not going to touch on everything we wanted to today.
Sure.
And we can always try to get a hold of you tomorrow as well,
Yeah.
or whenever.
Yeah, I mean, tomorrow after liturgy, I'll have some time for sure.
Okay.
Same here.
All right. So what time do you have to leave? You said like 4. Just so
Probably
I.
around like 4:30 is the safest.
Okay, so we got what?
25 odd minutes.
All right.
Like 25 minutes. Yeah.
All right, perfect. Yeah, just cut us off whenever you need to, because sometimes we can. I think you saw we did like a 3-hour video. So
Okay, so
Yeah.
can you pass? Would you pass the wine too?
which vino would you like?
Do not care.
Okay, well, sure.
Thank you.
Okay, so we talked a little bit.
Oh, you guys are in Arizona, right?
Yeah, so it's
Yeah. There's a.
Other bottle.
you're mixing, you disgusting human
There was
being.
nothing left. And no, just for the audience, there was this much in the bottle. We had one person briefly comment on me having a beer and smoking my pipe.
That was a while back, and I was also smoking.
And it's like I had one beer and I smoked a little tobacco. So
Yeah,
let's.
God forbid.
Yep.
So as far as tradition goes,
There we go.
I'm going to throw a bone to the Protestants. I'm wanting to say it was Charles Spurgeon. I think it was Spurgeon. Was known for smoking cigars, right? And one day a lady approached him from his congregation and said, Charles, I'm terribly worried about your smoking. And he goes, oh, why's that? And she goes, well, every time I see you, you're smoking a cigar. I'm worried that you have an addiction. He goes, madam, you needn't worry about that. If you see me smoking 2 cigars at once, then I have to.
Yeah. So if you guys see us double fisting wine, then comment.
Right. Well, I curious about the Arizona thing because I don't know if you're familiar with the Tool singer. You probably are.
Oh yeah, Merkin.
Mm.
Oh yeah, he's got Merkin,
Mm.
Caduceus. Yeah, Maynard, James Maynard Keenan.
Yeah. I
For
have
sure.
family who live right there in Phoenix, and they brought me over some of his
I got
wine.
food poisoning at one of his restaurants, but his wine is amazing.
Who
The wine is good.
you guys talking about?
He's too old. Let's continue.
Yeah.
You're older than I am.
Sorry for the detraction. but
Isn't that weird that I'm older than this guy?
I wouldn't have guessed it. It's a compliment.
Isaac,
Yeah.
I was under the impression we were going to be friends.
I haven't made a lot of friends recently.
I had
Show
a,
yourself.
I had a conversation at work, and I apologize for the digression, but if we're going to tell humorous stories, I was working briefly for the university up here at Flagstaff.
Oh yeah,
and
this
I
is a
was-
great one.
I was talking to this one of my coworkers, who's an older Native American lady, and somehow the topic of age came up. It's not something I generally bring up, and she goes, "How old are you, Nate?" And I was trying to think of something snarky to say in response, because I'm such a lovely human being that I can't just accept a question without being, a curmudgeon.
Mm.
But she says, "How old are you?" And I'm sitting there thinking for a response, or trying to think of a response. And she goes, "What, like 40?" What makes you say that?
The sound you make every time you stand up. Sorry.
I mean, the fact that I don't glow in the dark is kind of sad. I sound like a glow stick when I move.
All right, moving on. Me and Nathan like to make fun of each other.
Well, I try to make fun of you, but you're usually better at it than I am.
All right,
I'm
so
digging the dynamic.
okay, good, good. Okay, so our last topic before we talked about how old Nathan was, I think. Well, what did you have? Did you have? I know you know the topics that we're going to touch on. Is there something specific that you felt we could get to, with the last 20-25 minutes? I know feminism might take up a little bit longer than that.
Feminism will be fun, but
Yeah,
might be a part.
we could try to poke into that. I kind of have more to say about. I feel like I probably have more to say about the women's suffrage than I do.
Let's talk about
leadership.
Efficiency.
Let's
yeah.
talk about efficiency and tradition then. What
Sure,
did
go for it.
what did you think about Chesterton's discussion of the absurd degree of specialization in technology? And I know this will kind of tie into feminism later, but his whole bit where he's talking about a knife, and he says, yeah, a knife, you can use it to cut food, you can use it to sharpen a pencil, you can use it to do these myriad things, you can even use it to cut somebody's throat. But a pencil sharpener, you can only use to sharpen a pencil. He's like, it'd be funny if you tried to watch someone cut someone else's throat with a pencil sharpener, but it would be really unfortunate and terrible.
Yeah. That was an interesting section, and I almost took it on a personal note as looking at like the hyper specialization of our professions in the modern age, to the point where so I literally, where I'm at right now, I'm about to do a career change. I'm literally in the middle of it. But I work in like social media and marketing, right? Hyper specialized. Like I do social media. That's what I do. Like I'm not expected to do anything else like that. That is it, right? I'm there for that one role.
So you're in the
And
thick of it.
right. Yeah. I see a lot of nasty things, a lot of crazy things. Not good for the soul for the most part. But and this, I think there's something to be said about the idea of hyper specialization in our profession and the amount of time we put in to these hyper specialized jobs, and they kind of narrow the scope of our usefulness as men, right, or women. And it kind of hits deep when you think I spent all this time cultivating this skill and this job that really in reality, like taken outside of this context, doesn't mean anything to anybody and is not useful to anybody, right? So like if I was ever in a hairy situation, right, or let's say whatever, some doomsday scenario in society, the institutions of society and our comforts kind of collapse. No one's gonna sit there and be like, we have to call the social media manager.
Dude, so I've been doing the same thing as you for almost 8 years: photography, videography, social media managing. And once I had a kid, and then when I met my fiance, I was like, this is fun.
That's not me, by the way.
Yeah, I don't know why I did that.
I was gonna say it looks very different on the camera than the photos. Yeah.
Photoshop. I'm really good.
I am too good for Ian.
But no, I agree with you. I was like, I started weighing out my options. I was like, okay, if stuff hits the fan, who's going to be like, you know what we need right now? A photographer.
Right.
Document the end of the world. No, they probably need, and this may be a stretch, but a mechanic or a farmer, something that's actually gonna help. So
right. So I think there's something to be said about how the economy and a globalized economy and a highly technological based economy tends toward this hyper specialization, which in itself is like, okay, I'm not going to knock you for the career you have and the job you have. Like whatever puts food on the table, and if you're able to support yourself and your family and be a good influence in your community, God bless.
Yeah.
But I do think there's something to be said about the work that we do and the relation it has to our soul. So if we have this hyper specialization where you're sitting at a computer, or it doesn't have to be a computer, anything that is not necessarily outside of the context of that industry useful, I don't know if that's the most healthy thing for your soul, right? Is it healthy? Is the work I'm doing 9 to 5, 40 hours a week, like does it
your soul and others?
Right. Well, the answer is no. Social media, I mean, no, it doesn't.
Yeah.
But this does, again, like we said, this will segue into the feminism bit a bit. But I think the point that I got from this is the more we specialize, the more we see hyper specialization, the less useful people actually are outside of that context. They're not well rounded.
Well, here's an interesting thing as well. Like the whole idea of a profession is an interesting thing, right? Because
we spoke about this the other day.
Well, the etymology of the term profession is actually you declare something to be true.
This is what you do.
I profess my faith in Jesus Christ, or whatever I profess my adherence to the doctrine of Marx and Engels, or whatever, right? God forbid you do something so satanic. But nowadays it's become almost a pseudo religion to the point where, like you're saying, it's been destroying people's souls. But here's the interesting thing. One of the things that Chesterton touches on, right, is this whole idea that we have decided we're going to start fitting man's soul into society as opposed to shaping society to fit man's soul, right?
Yep, that is one of the key takeaways from this book, honestly.
Oh, it's one of the most profound things. And I honestly think that Chesterton's admiration for democracy is actually the greatest downfall in this book. This is like my second or third read through. And I've come to think that. So for anyone who didn't already realize, I am a devout, hardcore monarchist. I think that the worst thing that happened in the 20th century was the assassination of Tsar Nicholas and his family. The royal Romanov martyrs, as we would say in the Orthodox faith.
And you think one of the worst things that happened in America was what?
George Washington turning down the crown. But
that's a discussion.
We've got at least a two-part episode. But
yeah.
One of the reasons that I tend to think that is because this whole move away from feudalism, like everybody looks at feudalism as being this awful thing, but what's actually bad is when you mix feudalism and capitalism. right? Or when you mix feudalism and, say, socialism. These things don't work out because they disrupt the social balance that's necessary for feudalism, right? In the medieval period, when you are a serf, everybody reads that as, oh, you were poor and you didn't know how to do anything except for, plow and
Right.
maybe take care of your animals.
Right. Right.
But what being a serf meant was not actually any lessening of education or ineligibility to be an influential member of society. It meant that you were tied to the land. It meant that you couldn't go wherever you wanted, whenever you wanted. Right? You could go on pilgrimage. You could go visit other places.
But you were married to your land.
Yeah, but you couldn't. You inherited your land. You inherited your responsibility to that land, and that actually touches on Chesterton's whole idea that the problem with socialism is that it's still operating under the assumption that men can go wherever they want and do whatever they want.
Mm.
We actually need the traditions of, stability of place. As old as that can get sometimes.
Mm.
Like, believe me, Ian and I were both military brats. I mean, living for 6 years in one place, you start getting kind of antsy.
Or less.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
Mm.
but yeah, so
That is an interesting point. I think that's actually, if we're looking at possible anecdotes for the situation we're in, because I'm not here to drop black pills to say it's over, throw in the towel, like nothing's going to reverse course. We need to see people actually have an interest and a stake in their community, more than just this is where my job is and this is where my homeowner or my house is, or this is where my friends are. But an issue that I've seen too that kind of relates to the Chesterton point is that we don't have to rely on our community anymore. We really wanted to live in your apartment, 20 hours of the day, and never have to interact with and never have to interact with anyone in your community. You literally could at this point. You could have your groceries delivered to you. You can have food delivered to you. You don't even have to step outside of your room.
And you might have 500 Facebook friends too.
Exactly. So you get this faux sense of community, right? And not to say I haven't met wonderful people on social media. There's 2 of them sitting right before me.
Same.
But it's not, at the end of the day, it's not real, right? It's not, and that might be harsh, but it's like, it's not.
No, it's not.
It's not real, right? And so if I don't, again, modern America now, you could literally have a town be completely sufficient off of like what? They have a Walmart and maybe.
Well, you have a Walmart, let's say you have a Target for some of the less common things.
Right. Target, Walmart, and the power's on. And like people, that can be a whole city. I don't have to rely on a local butcher. I don't have to rely on a local grocer. I don't have to rely on the local mechanic. My food isn't being made at a local, there's local restaurants, but like there's just, the community, and what's the point of cities and communities? It's a group of people who have various skills that support the society, but now that doesn't exist anymore.
Well, here's an interesting.
I also wouldn't have to find a place to live in 30 days if we still had tradition.
Well, in archaeology, though, leads to some interesting things, right? So there's this site, Göbekli Tepe. If you're a nerd like me, you've heard about it, right? It's that Neolithic, very, very ancient civic/religious center in Anatolia. And it's considered to be like the birthplace of modern religion, right? That's what people are talking about. But the interesting thing that situation shows is because like this hilltop has these monoliths and everything. I mean, it's almost like a Stonehenge type structure, but it's even more artistically detailed, which is interesting. But according to some of the latest archaeological data coming out of there, people have been congregating and engaging in civic life around that hill for about 15,000 years, maybe longer if you interpret the data in a less absurd fashion, right? And what that means is that civic life, or shall we say city life, is necessarily built around religious structures. Because before Göbekli Tepe, the prevailing narrative had been, okay, well, people get together and then you see the rise of a priest or a priest king, and then you have religion that kind of supersedes the civic organization and changes into something different. Like that's what we thought was going on in Sumeria for a long time. But now with Göbekli Tepe, we're realizing like, wait a minute, like people were coming here because it was of religious importance, not because they just wanted to be there. And then they were like, well, we better invent Sky Daddy to worship so that we can invent a moral code. So one of the problems with modern cities is that we base it around convenience now. It's not built around a church. It's not built around a religious or sense of civic responsibility. It's built around, oh, well,
Taco Bell.
it's convenient for me. Taco Bell's a mile away instead of 10 miles away.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
And Taco Bell's next to Cane's, and Cane's is next to Wendy's, and Wendy's is next to Subway. And then you might find a good church.
Oh yeah, you get that beautiful American Main Street where it's just a series of shops
love
and
love
electrical wire going around the roads, and it's just it's
especially on a fast
peak
day,
aesthetics right there.
or especially during like a 40-day fast, and you're trying to figure out what you can eat, and you've had 7 peanut butter and jellies that day. It's like you drive down that strip.
Why are you looking for food if you've had 7 PB&Js, bro?
I know what you know what I mean. That's not fasting. Sorry,
but no,
bad advice.
But you touch on an interesting point though. Like, oh, how shall I say this?
How it distracts us from our spirituality.
Well, it distracts us from our spiritual life, and that's super bad.
All the neon lights, everything's like, come here, buy this, do this.
Well, everything. If you go out in a modern American city, most modern American cities, and it doesn't matter whether it's Chicago or whether it's rural Midwest, 90% of what you're going to see is business related. It's commerce. It's come here and spend your money. Like, everywhere you go is a place to spend your money. How many places?
And even your churches are in a shopping strip center.
Yeah.
Strip malls.
Yeah.
Strip mall. You got your church next to a Subway.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
What are we doing here?
I mean,
I'm not hating on the sandwich artists, but.
Well, one of the other things I kind of wanted to ask you about it, if we can briefly do this.
Sure. Yeah, I think you got what, 10 minutes, 15 minutes? What do you got?
5.
5.
Okay. So we'll not touch on Chesterton anymore. We'll meet up maybe tomorrow or the next day, and we'll record this.
Yeah, certainly.
Book-wise, what kind of authors do you have for us?
Yeah,
give
us a few.
Who've you read that you
It's gonna feel like a cop-out. It's going to feel like a cop-out, but it's not. It's
if you say the Bible, I'm going to smack you in because he said
no. I've never actually read that. No idea what that is.
It's just a book.
You can get it. It's at like every Motel 6.
Is there a PDF version of that?
Yeah, I'll send it to you.
Oh, cool.
Okay, well, I'm too far gone. I'm sorry, I can't do this.
No, everybody, make sure you read the Bible. Come on.
For a long time now, my favorite author. Oh yeah, hold on. I'm cutting out. Yeah, no. Okay, 100%. I read the Bible. It'd be kind of weird for me to be baptized next week and never have read the Bible. But my favorite author of all time has been for a while. Same guy, Tolkien through and through. Tolkien is my favorite author.
I heard you through the webcam.
I think that he is probably the best author, and this is controversial, the best author to come out of the last century, of the 20th century. He revived epics. It's so compelling, and it's so profound just reading it, and just story aside, just the way it's written, it almost is like it nourishes you as you're reading it. Just story aside, just the art of the craftsmanship of the writing in and of itself.
I would agree.
And there's a beauty in it that, even before I started taking it seriously, that kind of sinks into you. It seeps into your soul, and you might not be able to explain it, right? And the concepts that he's getting at, and I'm more of a nerd out a little bit, but I'm more of a Silmarillion fan than I am the trilogy when it comes to the books, whatever.
Okay, I've got to cut in for a moment. The worst part about the Silmarillion is the retelling of the fall of Gondolin. I read the Book of Lost Tales 1 and 2 before I read the Silmarillion.
Oh, okay.
And so, I mean, in there, it's like 75 or 80 pages. It's a super long narrative, and you're like, oh yeah, here's how Arundel's armor was forged. Here's how the final fight with Meglin played out. Like, all kinds of crazy cool details. Yeah. And then I read the Silmarillion, and I'm like, oh, the Fall of Gondolin. This is like my favorite story. It's like 25 pages, and I was like, what the heck?
Yeah, well, you went backwards. You read the more in depth than before you read the general. But
I was like 15 when I read that. I was
really?
hacked off. I was like, what the heck?
Okay.
There's so much stuff here that's supposed to be touched on that is completely left out.
Are you guys done?
I can't. Well, I will say I had been watching Lord of the Rings like my whole life. I had been reading it my whole life, right? But you hit a certain point as you mature where you're like, wait a minute, this is profound.
It's deeper than just people walk.
Right. And I remember Sir Roger Scruton was appearing on a podcast done by the Hoover Institute. I believe it's called Uncommon Knowledge, and he was discussing his book, How to Be a Conservative, I think is the title of it. Which, whatever. The only thing that I really got away from it is all of a sudden the Shire came up. My ears perked up. I was like, the Shire? Whoa, what are you talking about?
I know.
And he was kind of explaining how, like the Shire, it is the ideal. It is, and like, and my whole family, they're big fans of Lord of the Rings. And every time we watch the movies, we kind of have we had this discussion on it. And like, why is the Shire, like, why does that just seem right? Like, there's something about it that just seems inherently good. Like I didn't even know that I wanted it, but I just need it. Like, there's something inside of me that is reaching toward this. And because that's why we're having this discussion. That's why Chesterton writes about what's wrong with the world, because we're trying to build a community like that of the Shire, not in the fact that we all have to be hobbits with
Not in a utopian sense.
Right, not in a utopian sense. But
To quote Richard Rowland for a moment, like when you first read the Fellowship of the Rings and bits of the Hobbit, the Shire is full of petty crime. Like larceny is a legit problem.
Yeah.
There.
Drunks.
Well, it's not even drunks. Like it's like, oh yeah, so and so had a few too many ales, whatever. But it's like people stealing stuff is a big problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
but oh man, that's wonderful to hear. One more question for you. What is your favorite Tolkien work?
The Children of Hurin.
Really?
So the recounting of the tale of Turin Turambar is exquisite to me. Yeah.
I've got to ask you why, because I've read that.
Can anybody see my face right now?
I've read that. Well, so the last time I went on a road trip, I was driving from my parents' house in Missouri to Flagstaff, which for anyone who's unaware is a really, really, really bloody long drive.
Mm.
The first half of it is driving across Kansas, which is the most unpleasant thing you can ever do. But aside from driving across Texas, because you're in Texas for 19 hours on a 22-hour drive and it just sucks. But I was listening to the Silmarillion on the first part of that drive, and I got to the Children of Hurin, and I was like, I can't listen to this right now. It's like this is. I don't dislike it. Like I like it a lot. They're just, it's like 2 a.m, and I'm like, I can't listen to this right now. It's too dark.
Oh no, 100%. And I think the reason I love it is because I'm a sucker for tragedy, and Tolkien does not hold anything back when he wants to be tragic. It'll tear your heart out. It's tough stuff, but it's also, again, it's a reflection. It all points to truths,
Right.
It all points to truths and reflections of ourselves and beauty and all of this.
The thing that captures that for me though is the tale of Tenuviel in the Book of Lost Tales, because one of the saddest scenes in that, like everybody focuses on like one of my favorite characters that Tolkien ever wrote, right? And it's one of the more obscure ones, and people are going to think I'm a complete and utter nerd for this. But best character Tolkien ever wrote was Huon the Hound of Valinor.
Wow, that's a controversial take,
dude.
I think you guys need to start a podcast.
He is so,
yeah, honestly.
He's so awesome. Like the saddest part in that entire series, or in that entire story with Luthien, is when Baron's laying there dying after Karkaroth.
Hold on, wait a minute. Spoilers for anybody, right? Like anybody who might.
Oh, come on! The Silmarillion's been out for like 60 years. Read it for the love of God. It's not hard to find. But when Baron's laying there dying, and because Karkaroth has mauled him, and then Huon has finally killed Karkaroth and is also dying.
Yeah.
And he comes over and he speaks to Baron for the last time. And like the crazy part about that is it was only given to him to speak 3 times before he died. Right. So in many ways, the tragedy unfolds when he decides that he loves Luthien more than he loves, was it Curufin that's his master, or Celegorm? Yeah, so more than he loves Celegorm, and is like, or Curufin, and is like, okay, you know what?
This is what I'll use.
This, like, she is too beautiful. What she is doing is too noble. I can't not do something about this. And like, he is in some ways the architect of his own death. And I love that scene so much, but it's the saddest scene is when he talks, because like you never actually hear what he says. You never actually hear his narrative. Right. But yeah, he's my favorite character.
That's an interesting take.
Well, yeah. So Tolkien's your favorite author, and
cheers to that.
I have some more Tolkien reading to do, so I'll catch up with you guys on that. But Isaac, I definitely think we're going to do a part 2, part 3 potentially, and just so everybody knows, we're all talking about more collaborations in the future and trying to build a community, and not in the sense of the metaverse community, but a true community, a real community of people that can reach out to each other. So if anybody here wants to reach out to us, we're always open to questions. real quick.
if I may pause you for a moment, and I'm going to kind of surprise Ian here real quick. But for anyone who didn't know, the Ancient Faith Radio was going to put on a Christ and Tolkien conference, right? Looked like an awesome thing. They were going to have Cyril Jenkins as a speaker, Dr. Lisa Kutris as a speaker, some really awesome people. They were also going to allow various musical performers to perform at the conference. They were going to have a couple of people, or they were seeking submissions for presented, papers that could be presented, for fictional stories to be put into an anthology and stuff like that. Unfortunately, because of the current insanity that our world is experiencing,
that's no longer
it's
happening.
no longer going to happen.
Mm.
However, I am going to ask Ian a question now, and that is, Ian,
Yes.
how do you feel about starting or trying to start a publishing company so we can get a hold of those folks who had papers and stories they wanted to submit?
All right, guys.
Start publishing that.
Orthodox Logos publishing company coming soon. If that answers it, yes, 100%. So obviously, we'll talk to you more, Isaac. We'll probably have you write some stuff. I know you've done some stuff for the magazine, so I appreciate that. And yeah, but touching on that, there'll be more content coming from us, whether it's books, magazines, podcasts, YouTube videos. We want to do it all, and I hope everybody follows Isaac. I'll make sure to put his
Link
his acts in the description. And I don't want to hold you any longer, man. I hope you have a blessed evening and enjoy liturgy, enjoy Vespers rather. And we'll talk to you soon and schedule.
Yeah, it's been a wonderful experience. Let's get this going again. This is good. Thank you for bringing me on.
All right, man. Well,
Cheers.
God bless.
Bro.
And as Tolkien would say, I don't know.
You can't throw that up.
All right, later, man.
Yeah, see ya.
All right, later.